1. Focus on what you can control. Aurelius emphasized the importance of directing our energy towards things within our control, such as our thoughts, actions, and attitudes, rather than fixating on external events beyond our influence. 2. Acceptance of the present moment. He advocated for acceptance of the present moment, understanding that peace of mind often comes from embracing things as they are, rather than constantly yearning for what could be. 3. Practice self-reflection. Aurelius stressed the importance of self-reflection and introspection. Taking time to examine one's thoughts, emotions, and actions can lead to personal growth and understanding. 4. Live in accordance with nature. He believed in living in harmony with nature, not only in the environmental sense but also in alignment with the natural order of life, understanding and accepting its transient and cyclical nature. 5. Maintain inner calm amidst chaos. In turbulent times, Aurelius urged maintaining inner tranquility by controlling emotional responses and developing resilience in the face of adversity. 6. Live in accordance with nature. He believed in living in harmony with nature. Embrace adversity as a teacher. He saw challenges and setbacks as opportunities for growth and learning, fostering resilience and strength through adversity. 7. Practice empathy and kindness. Aurelius highlighted the importance of compassion and understanding towards others, recognizing the shared human experience and the value of kindness in all interactions. 8. Live with purpose and virtue. He emphasized the significance of living a life guided by virtue and moral values, focusing on contributing positively to society and embodying integrity. 9. Remember the impermanence of life. Aurelius reminded us of the fleeting nature of life, encouraging a perspective that values each moment and relationship. 10. Practice gratitude. Finally, he stressed the importance of gratitude, encouraging appreciation for the simple pleasures in life and recognizing the things we often take for granted. Almost exactly 10 years ago, I bought the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius on Amazon. Amazon Prime didn't exist then, and to qualify for free shipping, I had to purchase a few other books at the same time. 2 or 3 days later, they all arrived. It's a medium-sized paperback, mostly white with a golden spine. On the cover, Marcus is shown in relief, pardoning the barbarians. Here, for our age, is Marcus's great work, says Robert Fagles in his blurb. I was 19 years old. I didn't know who Marcus Aurelius was, besides the old guy in Gladiator. And I certainly didn't know who Robert Fagles or Gregory Hayes, the translator, was. But something drew me to this book almost immediately. I suppose it was luck that brought me to the specific translation I'd chosen, Modern Library Edition. Though the Stoics would call it fated, but what arrived would change my life. It would be for me what Tyler Cowen would call a quake book, shaking everything I thought I knew about the world. However little that actually was, I would also become what Stephen Marchi has referred to as a centi-reader, reading Marcus Aurelius well over 100 times across multiple editions and copies. In the course of those readings and my study of Stoicism, a lot has changed. Marcus Aurelius has guided me through breakups and getting married, through being relatively young and poor and relatively older and well off. His wisdom has helped me with getting fired and with quitting, with success and with struggles. I've carried him to close to 12 countries and moved him to multiple houses. I've turned to him for articles and books and casual dinner conversation. The one pristine white cover is now its own shade of tan. But with every read, every time I've touched the book, I've gotten something new, or been reminded of something timeless and important. Now with the release of my own translation and compendium, The Daily Stoic, and a daily email newsletter at dailystoic.com, I wanted to take the time to reflect on what I've learned in 10 years with one of the greatest and most unique pieces of literature ever created. It was the opening passage of Book 5 about our reluctance to get out of bed and get moving in the morning. That struck me most on my first read. As you can see, I wrote "fuck" with a highlighter, and you can see how important that passage was to me at the time in a 2007 blog post. Later, I would print out this passage and put it next to my desk in bed. I think it was that, as a college student, I needed that extra motivation. I was a little lazy and entitled. I needed to seize life and take advantage of it, and Marcus served me well in that regard for a long time. Though I will say that today, I think less about the passage that motivates me to do more and be more active. If I was to put a different one on my desk, I'd choose from Book 10, "If you seek tranquility, do less." In my first read of Meditations, I highlighted the line, "It can ruin your life, only if it ruins your character." In a later read, I added brackets around that line, just for more emphasis, and I underlined in pen what came after. "Otherwise, it cannot harm you inside or out." Pages Gexyxkik and XXV of Hay's introduction is where I was first introduced to the distillation of Stoicism into 3 distinct disciplines: perception, action, will. It was this order that eventually shaped both the Obstacle is the Way and the Daily Stoic. When I get a skid to explain the 3 disciplines, this is usually my short answer: see things for what they are. Do what we can, endure and bear what we must. Hayes' introduction also lists Alexander Pope, Goethe, and William Alexander Percy as students and fans of Marcus Aurelius. Reading works by all of these individuals, especially Percy, and his adopted son, Walker Percy, sent me down a rabbit hole that would be one of the most enjoyable of my reading life. I encourage everyone to read Percy's Lanterns on the Levee. In Book 4, Marcus reminds himself to think about all the doctors who died after furrowing their brows over how many deathbeds, how many astrologers after pompous forecasts about others' ends. In black pen somewhat recently, it looks like I added "or plotters, schemers, and strategists, outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and destroyed, I suppose." That was a dig at myself and other smart people. None of what we do lasts, no matter how clever or brilliant. It's good to remember that. So we throw out other people's recognition. What's left for us to prize, I answer in blue pen in one read. To embrace and to resist our nature. What did Marcus mean by that? I think it's encouraging what is good about us and to fight against what is bad. To encourage the parts of ourselves that are moral, helpful, honest, and aware, and to fight against what is selfish, petty, short-sighted, and wrong. It's to live by what Warren Buffett calls the inner scorecard and ignore the outer one, other people's recognition. In that same passage, Marcus also writes, "If you can't stop prizing a lot of other things, then you'll never be free, independent, imperturbable." I have in my copy a jotted note from Fight Club. Only when you've lost everything, you are free to do anything. When I first read Meditations, I was in the middle of some ridiculous drama with my college roommates. I won't bore you with the details, but at the time, I was frustrated, disappointed, and miserable about where I was living. I think this was the reason that I latched on to the meditation in Book 6 about how if you were sparring with someone and they hurt you, you wouldn't yell at them or whine or hold it against them. You just make a mental note about it and act accordingly in the future. I can see where I actually wrote the name of my roommates down to explicitly make this connection. Do not hate them, I wrote to myself, remain aloof. I said earlier that all I'd originally known of Marcus Aurelius was that he was the old guy in Gladiator future research. Taught me that depiction was even more interesting than the movie presented. First off, Maximus, Russell Crowe's character, was based on a real Roman story, the General Cincinnatus, who saved Rome but wanted simply to return to his farm. Second, Marcus's son Commodus, Joaquin Phoenix, was real too, and probably even more horrible in real life. He was, in fact, killed by a gladiator, and he did enjoy torturing and hurting people. It makes you think, how could such a great man have had such an awful son? What does that say about his teachings? Marcus writes, "Mastery of reading and writing requires a master. Still more so life." I wrote Tucker RG in the margins next to that passage. RG stands for Robert Greene, who was and is my master in writing and more, in life. Tucker refers to Tucker Max, who was a mentor of mine in writing and business. It occurs to me now that I understood this passage only partway. I was focused on the first half, when really the more so lifeline is the most important. Understanding this could have saved me a lot of trouble. In Book 12, as Meditations is wrapping up, Marcus writes, It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. This passage struck me early on, I can tell, but it struck me hardest in 2014 when I was rereading the passage. I know this because I wrote an article with that line as the title, as I was dealing with the fact that my book had just been snubbed by the New York Times bestseller list and I was dealing with the fallout. It was helpful to ask, why do I care what these people think again? Why does their opinion matter to me? Understanding the words is not always enough. Sometimes we have to really feel them, to have their meaning forced upon us. This was one of those events. Going back through my copy to write this post, I found a white note card with some bullet points written on it. At first, I couldn't figure out what these were about. Then I realized they were notes I'd written down before my conversation with Greg Bishop. I said earlier that all I'd originally known of Marcus Aurelius was that he was the old guy in Gladiator. Future research taught me that depiction was even more interesting than the movie presented. First off, Maximus, Russell Crowe's character, was based on a real Roman story, the general Cincinnatus who saved Rome but wanted simply to return to his farm. Second, Marcus's son Commodus, Joaquin Phoenix, was real too, and probably even more horrible in real life. He was in fact killed by a gladiator, and he did enjoy torturing and hurting people. It makes you think, how could such a great man have had such an awful son? What does that say about his teachings? Marcus writes, mastery of reading and writing requires a master, still more so life. I wrote Tucker RG in the margins next to that passage. RG stands for Robert Greene, who was and is my master in writing and more in life. Tucker refers to Tucker Max, who was a mentor of mine in writing and business. It occurs to me now that I understood this passage only part way. I was focused on the first half, when really, the more so lifeline is the most important. Understanding this could have saved me a lot of trouble. In Book 12, as Meditations is wrapping up, Marcus writes, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." This passage struck me early on, I can tell, but it struck me hardest in 2014 when I was rereading the passage. I know this because I wrote an article with that line as the title, as I was dealing with the fact that my book had just been snubbed by the New York Times bestseller list and I was dealing with the fallout. It was helpful to ask, why do I care what these people think again? Why does their opinion matter to me? Understanding the words is not always enough. Sometimes we have to really feel them, to have their meaning forced upon us. This was one of those events. Going back through my copy to write this post, I found a white note card with some bullet points written on it. At first, I couldn't figure out what these were about. Then I realized they were notes I'd written down before my conversation with Greg Bishop. On what I would guess is my third or fourth read, I marked this passage. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. There are not many reminders of your own mortality at 20. This was one of my first. There's no question that for every first-time reader of Meditations, it's the opening line of Book 2 is one of the most striking. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. And then the passage which follows is great, if not a bit contradictory. Throw away your books. Stop letting yourself be distracted. Did he mean the very book I was reading? One of my favorite lines, to accept without arrogance, to let it go with indifference. Another translation of the same. Receive without pride, let go without attachment. In one passage, Marcus justifies his love of art. He points out that tragedies, plays, help remind us of what can happen in life. He also makes an interesting point. If something gives you pleasure on that stage, it shouldn't cause you anger on this one. If you can appreciate it in fiction, you can appreciate it in life and learn from both. In Book 5, I learned what philosophy really was. It's not an instructor, as Marcus put it. It's not the courses I was taking in school. It is medicine. It's a soothing ointment, a warm lotion, It's designed to help us deal with the difficulties of life, to heal, as Epicurus said, the suffering of man. It wasn't until last week, rereading Marcus, that I noticed the word stillness as it appears in Book 6, 7. To move from one unselfish action to another with God in mind. Only there, delight in stillness. Stillness was something I had been thinking about a lot. How to find it, how to get it, why it's superior to activity. I was looking for it in Eastern texts, and here it has been in Stoicism the entire time. Book 9, 6. I found not only a potential epigraph for my book, The Obstacle is the Way, which I noted in blue pen in 2013, but the best possible summation of Stoicism there is objective judgment, now, at this very moment. Unselfish action now, at this very moment. Willing acceptance now at this very moment of all external events. That's all you need. At some point after I read the Hayes translation, I picked up another translation of Marcus, probably one by George Long or A.S.L. Farquharson. That was free online. I was immediately struck by how the beautiful lyrical book I loved had become dense and unreadable. It struck me that if I had cheaped out and tried to get for free what I'd bought instead, my entire life might have turned out differently. Books are investments. Be glad to put in your money. Marcus has a wonderful phrase for the approval and cheering of other people. He calls it the clacking of tongues that's all public appraise is, he says. Anyone that works in the public eye who puts their work or their life out there for consumption could use to remember this phrase. Often injustice lies in what you aren't doing, not only in what you are doing. Or as we say more modernly, the only thing required for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Don't try to get even with other people, Marcus says at one point. Just don't be like that. The student as a boxer, not a fencer. Why? Because the fencer has a weapon they must pick up. A boxer's weapons are a part of him, he and the weapon are one. Same goes for knowledge, philosophy, and wisdom. Marcus commands himself to winnow his thoughts. He has a great standard. If someone were to ask you right now, what are you thinking about, could you give a concise answer? If not, you're daydreaming and wandering too much. It stares you right in the face, Marcus writes. No role is so well suited to philosophy as the one you happen to be in right now. Was he referring specifically to the role of emperor? Did he mean that any and every role is the perfect one for philosophy? I prefer to think it is the latter. I've been lucky enough that some generous fans have sent me rare old copies of Meditations. They're falling apart, worn with age. It strikes me what a Stoic would have thought if given a book that was then a couple hundred years old. They'd think about the person who owned it and what became of them, dead. They'd think about all the things the person did other than study philosophy, mostly pointless stuff, and they'd also think of the difficult times that the wisdom contained within may have helped them, which is what I think now. And then they'd consider how we are all subject to the rhythm of events, and that someone may pick up this book after them and have the same thoughts. Going through one copy of the Hayes translation a few years ago, I found a receipt. It said January 2007, and it was from a Borders in Riverside, California. I'd bought mine on Amazon, so I knew it wasn't mine. Then I realized this was my wife's copy. She'd bought the book shortly after we'd met, on my recommendation. That she'd read it after I mentioned it in passing made me think our feelings might be mutual. It was one of the first things we'd connected over. 10 years later,